Hello, my name is Tricia Bradbury, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this civic commemoration of the Holocaust Memorial Day on behalf of the Lord Lieutenant of Worcestershire, who is the Queen's representative in the county. Today, we are remembering those who have died horrifically in a number of genocides, including Auschwitz, when Nazis used propaganda and persecution to try and rid Germany of Jews, in Cambodia, when an estimated 2 million civilians were murdered, in Rwanda, when 1 million Tutsis and Hutus were killed, in Bosnia, with the genocide being the largest incident of mass murder since 1945. A young survivor of that writing, "They didn't care we were unarmed. Their primary concern was that we were Muslim and they wanted us dead." It is an important day for all humanity to realise that genocide does not take place on its own. It's a steady process which can begin if discrimination, racism and hatred are left unchecked. Even in the UK, prejudice and hate language must be challenged by all of us. We must not put labels on groups of people, making them other and marginalising them. We can choose to be the light in the darkness. When we see identity-based persecution, misinformation circulating, and denial of justice to those disadvantaged and isolated. So it's especially good that on this important day, we not only have input from the Mayor of Worcester, Councillor Joe Hodges, and the Vice-Chancellor of the University, Professor David Green, but also 3 schools represented on this video with student contributions from King's School Worcester, from Blessed Edward and Tudor Grange Academy. We are, of course, all looking forward to the keynote presentation from Petr Torak, who will be speaking about the Roma genocide during World War II. I am confident you will find the rest of this video thought-provoking. And remember, you too can play your part and be the light in the darkness. Thank you.
The theme of Holocaust Memorial Day this year is Be the Light in the Darkness. Sadly, we are not able this year to gather together in person to commemorate this occasion, but I welcome you all to join with me in marking this day with this recording. What does Be the Light in the Darkness mean for all of us and for our thoughts and memories of the Holocaust? Whilst we reflect on the depths to which humanity can sink, we can also think about the ways that humanity resists the darkness as individuals and as communities. And this year we are asked to reflect on the different kinds of darkness and also ways of being the light. When the darkness draws in on certain groups of people, filling others with mistrust and hatred of them and resulting in persecution, it is important that there are others who will resist this and shine a light on those being persecuted and show kindness and bring whoever is responsible for that darkness to account. Sadly, prejudice and hostility against people based on their identity continues to hurt people here in the UK and around the world. This year's theme asks us all to take responsibility to tackle prejudice, discrimination and intolerance and be witnesses individually and in communities. Holocaust Memorial Day gives us the chance to remember and to work for a safer and better future for everyone. This year, I'm very pleased to welcome Petr Torak, MBE, who represents the often forgotten Roma community who suffered so badly in the Holocaust and which continues to experience prejudice nowadays. Petra came to this country seeking asylum, and whilst there are those in the UK who have their own intolerance and prejudice towards the Gypsy, Roma and travelling community, it is on a different scale to the Czech Republic, which is Petra's place of birth. Petr was a police officer until 2017, and since retiring from the police force, he has been chief executive of Compass, a charity which promotes community harmony through the sharing of cultural knowledge. Petr is a spokesperson for the Roma community, and he is here to tell us about the plight of the persecuted Roma people during the Second World War, and we welcome him to speak to us here today.
My name is David Green. I'm Vice-Chancellor and Chief Executive of the University of Worcester. And the University of Worcester was founded in 1946 to win the peace through education by a nation which was victorious but exhausted by 6 long years of war. Now, those early students and the staff were overwhelmingly ex-servicemen and women, and they quickly created something which we now know as the Worcester spirit, and that's summarized by 2 words: democracy and happiness. And you can understand, if you think back to that early days of the college as it was then in 1946, why those 2 words were on their lips and in their hearts. Because they, like everybody else in the world, had been horrified by the discovery of the Nazi death camps and the fact that 6 million of our fellow human beings had been deliberately murdered, put into, and their bones incinerated. And it was just terrible. And then it became even more terrible when people realized that this included not only adults, but it included tiny children. And they were victims simply because they were Jewish, because they were black, because they were opponents of the Nazi regime, because they were Roma. Now, 2 years ago, I had the great privilege of going to Paris with my 91-year-old father. At the time, he was 91, and my oldest daughter, who was 18 at that time. And we took a hotel in the not very fashionable 3rd district of Paris. And my father had been a boy in Paris just before the war. He was the son of stateless Russian refugees. And while my daughter and I were walking around and my father was resting in the hotel room, we came across on an early September day, a lovely day, we came across this tranquil square in this middle of the busy district of Paris, crowded area without much green space. And in this garden, which was full of small children, and there was a special playground for small children, and then there was a corner where older people were playing boule, the French game, I came across this picture here, this behind a fountain, this plaque bearing these names, and you can see it now on your screen. And I'll give you a rough translation of it from the French. And it says, during the occupation, arrested by the police of the Vichy government who were cooperating with the Nazi occupiers, more than 11,000 children were deported from France between 1942 and 1944 and assassinated at Auschwitz because they were Jews. And of these, over 500 were here from the 3rd arrondissement of Paris. And amongst these were 87 who were so little that they hadn't yet had the opportunity to go to school. And you'll see amongst the names, the youngest, who was Françoise Soukno, just 2 months old. All murdered simply because they were Jewish. What a horrific crime. A horrific crime at any time, in any nation, anywhere in the world. A true crime against humanity. Now, people say sometimes, well, the Holocaust was then, this is now. the world has learnt that anti-Semitism is something for the past. And the history books, we must remember the Holocaust, of course, and pay tribute to the victims. But we don't need to concern ourselves about anti-Semitism now. I beg to differ. On January the 6th, 2021, a mob summoned by the President of the United States, inflamed by a speech that he and others made, marched on the Capitol of the United States, the Capitol buildings where the Senate and the House of Representatives were in session, and did their best to stop the free and fair election results being confirmed by the Congress, which would have led, and which did lead, to the defeat of President Trump and his replacement by President-elect and now President Biden. Amongst those in the mob were many racists, white supremacists, and anti-Semites. And that's not me that's saying that. Just look at what they're wearing on their sweatshirts. Here's one who's got Camp Auschwitz, and that's where these children, tiny children, were all murdered. Camp Auschwitz, and a loose translation of the notorious inscription above the gates, Arbeit macht frei, which stands in his translation for work brings freedom. And then another with the 6MWE across his chest. What does that stand for? It stands for 6 million wasn't enough. So anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is alive in the world today. And we need to do everything that we can, everything humanly possible, to stop it and to stop the racism which it so often accompanies and the racism which keeps so many of our fellow citizens down and discriminated against, and in the very worst, takes their lives. So what can we do? Well, I go back to the University of Worcester was founded to win the peace through education. We need to strengthen our democratic institutions and society. Be vigilant for democracy. When it comes to freedom, we must always be vigilant. We need to build up our institutions, our universities and our schools. Education is also a recipe for tackling racism. And when we do that, and we work and we take the words of the great late Arthur Ashe, the first black person ever to win a Wimbledon singles title, and he said when he was asked what should you do about tackling racism, he said start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And those of us in Worcestershire, those of us at the University of Worcester, we've got a lot to work with. And we need to strengthen our institutions, improve our education, make an even bigger impact in society, work with our fellow citizens, and then truly we can realize here and contribute around the world to ensuring that the rights of every person in the world to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are properly guaranteed. Thank you very much on this Holocaust Remembrance Day. May God hold you in the palm of his hand as we work together against racism, anti-Semitism, and for freedom, which is so precious.
Hello, my name is Petr Torak, MBE, and I'm a Czech Roma living in Peterborough. The theme of this year's commemoration of Holocaust Memorial Day is Be the Light in the Darkness. I want to talk to you about the darkness that Roma people have faced throughout the history and how we can, each of us, be the light in the darkness. Because when we expose our darkness to the light, healing happens and unknown gifts and talents are revealed. Roma people come from India. Between the 3rd and 9th century, they started migrating from India towards Europe. They traveled through Persia and Byzantine, and it is estimated that they have arrived into Europe in the 14th century. Since they have arrived into Europe, they faced systematic process of discrimination, marginalization, abuse, and also extermination. In 15th century, they were more in most European countries. In the 16th century, they were in Britain and Russia, 17th century in America, and in 18th century in Australia. But as I said, they faced lots of discrimination. Many people were scared of Roma people. They looked very differently from the rest of the European society. They had darker skin complexion. They were dressing completely differently. They were having lots of jewelry. They spoke different language and had a different culture. Some people also believed that they were doing black magic, and also because of their monoprofessions. All those were probably the reasons why the society was scared of Roma people, why they didn't like them. Some people thought that they were Ottoman spies and that they were actually doing wrong things. Between the 16th and 19th century, there were many Roma declarations and laws. Roma people in many European countries were declared as outlaws. It was actually illegal to be a Roma person. There was a capital punishment for trespassing. So if Roma people went from one place to a city or a different place, they were punished for this. The punishment normally was that men were hanged on the first occasion, and Roma women and Roma children were punished by cutting their ears as a punishment, as a warning. If they were caught again, they would be hanged as well. And in many European countries, Roma people were enslaved. For example, in Romania, Roma people were enslaved for about 300 years. Then, during the rule of Maria Theresia and her son Joseph II, there were many attempts to assimilate Roma, to take away from them their culture, their history, the way they spoke or they looked. So for this, many Roma people were, actually all Roma people were issued with gypsy IDs, in which they had their fingerprints taken, their physical features were noted, so they could be easily identified by the state. Roma people were prohibited from entering into designated areas, they couldn't speak their language, and Roma children were removed from Roma parents in attempt to re-educate them, to actually take away from them the culture and to make them to look and speak the way the rest of the society did. But then the darkest time for the Roma people, as for many other communities, came. During the Second World War in 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped the Roma living in Nazi Germany of their citizenship. Roma people were subjected to violence, experiments, imprisonment in work camps and also concentration camps, and then later died in genocide. The estimated number of Roma victims is between 750,000 to 1 million of Roma people. For example, in the Czech Republic, it is estimated that 95% of all Roma people were exterminated. They disappeared. 95% of all Roma people in the Czech Republic. Between 1933 and 1945, Sinti and Roma gypsies suffered greatly as victims of Nazi persecution and genocide. Building on long-held prejudices, the Nazi regime viewed gypsies both as asocials and also as racial inferiors, believed to be a threat to their biological purity and strength of the superior Aryan race. During the World War II, the Nazis and their collaborators killed hundreds of thousands of Sinti and Roma men, women and children across German-occupied Europe. Unfortunately, all those atrocities didn't stop with the Second World War. Between 1945 and 1989, during the communist regime especially, there was forced settling of nomadic families. So the communist regime had removed caravans and horses from Roma people and placed them into substandard accommodation. Roma women were sterilized. It was actually a state policy to reduce Roma population. Roma children were sent into segregated educations, into segregated schools for physically and mentally disabled children and Roma children. Because to be a Roma meant to be not as good as other people. And Roma people were expected to take the lower grade jobs, cleaning, factory, building work, and so on. It didn't stop. In 1989, with the fall of the communist regime, Roma people, lost their jobs because they were in those low-skilled jobs, and because of privatization, they lost their jobs as a first people. So with this unemployment, Roma people were socially isolated. Because of this social isolation and unemployment, there was a huge tension in the communities, in the society. People started demonstrating against the Roma people, saying that Roma people are lazy, they don't want to work, they are only benefiting from the social system. Roma people starting falling into this apathy and resignation, thinking, what's the point? What's the point of me sending my child into school if they will be anyway, they'll be discriminated at the school, they'll be bullied, and they will not have a prosperity of getting a good job when they leave the school. And when we talk about the inappropriate living conditions, here are just some examples from Eastern Slovakia, where thousands of Roma people live in Roma settlements, in those wooden kind of houses with no facility, no running water, no electricity, nothing. Same goes on for the negative discourse and media discourse. This is an example of a top politician from Czech Republic using the words that the Nazis would use against Roma, Jews and others, where he actually used on his during election, he used the slogan money to decent people, not to parasites, referring to Roma people as a parasites in 21st century in contemporary Europe. And the police attitude as well, where police officers abuse often their power by assaulting and maltreating Roma people and also Roma children very often. And as I said, Roma children still go into segregated education in these days. And hate crime is a huge problem because of the stereotypical views and the rise of neo-Nazism in Europe. There are many people that suffer with discrimination and hate crime, and some people lose their lives. There are many Roma victims that lost their lives because of hate crime. And because of hate crime, we've moved into the UK as well. Because in 1999, there was loads of neo-Nazis and the violence was on a rise. I was beaten up by skinheads. My mom and my brother were assaulted by skinheads. And that was when my parents said enough is enough and we are leaving this country. And we came into the UK to seek asylum here. And I've always had a dream as a child to become a kind of a superhero. This superhero that kind of tears their shirt and they've got a uniform underneath it and they go help other people. And that has always been my dream. And, when I was a young person, I wanted to become a police officer. But it was obvious that in Czech Republic, even if I would manage to become a police officer, I would face loads of prejudices and discrimination. In the UK, I obviously couldn't become a police officer straight away. I had to start from the very beginning to learn English and all the things. So I started working in factories, then in customs service, and then in 2006 I've managed to fulfill my dream and I became a police officer. I worked for Cambridgeshire Constabulary for 11 years. And whilst I was working for Cambridgeshire Constabulary, I've recognized the role that I'm playing, we're inspiring loads of young Roma people. They suddenly saw this positive role model from their community and they started aspiring to become also a police officer and other roles. And because of this power of positive role models, I decided to do more and more community work. Eventually, after 11 years of policing work, I've decided to dedicate my life to community work. I've been organizing Roma celebrations, for example, International Roma Day, and we've been running a Saturday school for Roma children and older children. But my specialism is in Roma mentoring of Roma pupils and getting them into the frontline jobs where they can be seen as a positive role models for their own families, for their own community, but also for the rest of the society. And this is then the product of such work, that I've been mentoring many Roma men and women and manage them to succeed, to actually get their dream job and become this light in the darkness. For my community work, I have received a huge honor, a huge award in the form of Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. In 2015, I've received this award from the Queen, and it was absolutely amazing. And it was such an honor for me, for an asylum seeker coming into the UK, getting such an honor. But also for me, it was another opportunity to improve the relationships between the Roma and the rest of the societies. To show that Roma people, if they are given a chance, equal chance, they can do as good as anybody else in our societies. And that was a very strong message, because that's what it is. We need in our Roma community positive role models. Positive role models like was Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mr. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, or Princess Diana, Malcolm X, or ex-president Mr. Obama. All those were positive role models. All those were people that were the light in the darkness. And that's what the Roma community needs as well. Roma community needs a light in the darkness. Somebody that will be not only positive role model to the Roma community, but also to the rest of the society, to show them and show the rest of the world that Roma people can do as good as anybody else if they are given the equal chance. Thank you very much.
Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames consume my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence deprive me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God himself. Never, 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 never.
Auschwitz by Charles N. Whitaker. Semi-quaver chugging on the train on the track, and the people on board who will never go back, and the terror in the eyes of all the young ones to go, no one knowing that the train comes to slow. Those men at the station as the ramps drop down, but humanity lost is the only crippled sound. Hope gone for those who stand behind the hard sharp wire, and the smoke in the towers rises just a little higher. The blue ink stabs a little harder in the skin, above the veins of despair where murder let in, and the terror in the eyes of all those about to leave, another train on the track, no last minute reprieve, and the slow crotchet chugging on the train on the track, and the people on board who will never go back.
What If It Were Me by Neve Hannon. I was walking through the park one day,
pottering about in my usual way,
when I saw two surly youths staring at me, two surly youths with a boy pinned to a tree.
The youth called out, "You've got something to say." I bent my head low and went on my way.
But something stopped me, a sound helpless and weak. It got louder and turned into a shriek.
I stopped in my tracks. Who would help me? What hope would I have but I pinned to a tree?
I can now hear their taunts and jeers, with words so foul they burnt my ears.
I turned on my heels and strode back to the tree, where the two boys stood staring at me.
It's wrong and disgraceful what you have done here. It's behaviour like this that spreads violence and fear.
Everyone's different, not two are the same. To judge someone inferior is cause for shame. This isn't a game to share with a friend. It's up to everyone to make racism end.
The youths sulked off, and I noted with glee that the boy was smiling from under the tree.
Hello, my name is Asha Akron, and I'm the Diversity and Wellbeing Officer for Tudor Grange Academy. I will be performing the poem Everyone Sang by Siegfried Sassoon. Everyone suddenly burst out singing, and I was filled with such delight, as prison birds must find your freedom, orchards and dark green fields, on and out of sight. Everyone's voice was suddenly lifted, and beauty came like a setting sun. My heart was shaken with tears, and horror drifted away. Oh, but everyone was a bird, and the song was wordless. The song will never be done.
Please join in with the statement of commitment. We recognise that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning.
We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's and communities' collective memory. We honour the survivors still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and of all genocides. We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil.
We recognise that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability or sexuality makes some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learned. We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by organising an activity to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination and racism. We value a free, respectful and democratic society.
I'm Yvonne Stollard, Chair of the Worcestershire Interfaith Forum,
Before we conclude, I would like to thank all those who have made this event such a success. Deputy Lieutenant Tricia Bradbury, Mayor of Worcester, Councillor Joe Hodges, and the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Worcester, Professor David Green, for their eloquent words and support for Worcester's Holocaust Memorial Day event. Thanks too to the students from the University of Worcester, Blessed Edward Oldcorn Catholic College, Tudor Grange Academy, the King's School, and Nunnery Wood High School for their much valued contributions. I would particularly like to thank Reverend Helen Kane and her team from the Worcestershire Interfaith Forum and the Platform Housing Group who organised this event, and also the University of Worcester's communications team whose expertise made it all possible. And last, but certainly not least, a very special thanks to Petr Torak for his powerful and thought-provoking presentation. The Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities form Europe's largest ethnic minority, with Muslims a close second. They share a history of persecution with Jewish people. Both communities have suffered centuries of racist hostility, and both were targeted by the Nazis during the Second World War. Both continue to have to challenge discriminatory language and stereotypes. In the UK, despite the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities being classed as ethnic groups and should theoretically be protected against discrimination, it remains a common occurrence. We need to work together to try to change the destructive narrative of anti-Gypsyism by educating the general public, journalists, and our elected officials. I fear it will take a long time to successfully challenge all stereotypes and discriminatory practices, but hope this event has made a step or two towards achieving this goal, in Worcester at least. Let us be the light in the darkness.